Welcome to Stories Junction. Let's begin today's story. Life doesn't shatter in a single dramatic blow. It erodes, piece by piece, so slowly you don't see the cracks until they're canyons. For me, it began on a rainy Thursday evening in Portland, the kind of drizzle that seeps into your bones. I was sprawled on the couch, half watching some documentary about deep-sea creatures, when Sarah breezed into the living room. She was already dressed, black jeans, a leather jacket, her hair pulled into a loose bun. "Heading out with the grad school girls," she said, leaning down to plant a quick kiss on my forehead. "Don't wait up, Jake." Her voice was light, her smile the same one I'd fallen for years ago. I mumbled something about having a good time, but as the door clicked shut behind her, a faint unease coiled in my chest. I tried to ignore it. She'd done these nights before, catching up with Kelly and the others, swapping stories about their old professors over cheap wine. But that night, sleep wouldn't come. I tossed in bed, the rain tapping a restless rhythm against the window. By midnight, I was up, pacing the living room in my socks, the hardwood cold under my feet. I checked my phone, nothing. 1 a.m. came and went, then 2 a.m., and I was pacing harder, pretending I wasn't worried. I told myself she was fine, just lost track of time, laughing too loud in some dive bar. But the quiet of the house pressed in, amplifying every creak, every doubt. At 2:19 a.m., the front door finally groaned open. I stood in the hallway, arms crossed, tried to keep my face neutral. Sarah stumbled in, and the sight hit me like a punch. She looked like she'd walked through a storm. Not just the rain, but something fiercer. Her hair was a wild mess, strands plastered to her neck. Mascara streaked her cheeks, and her boots dangled from one hand, mud-caked and scuffed. Her jacket hung off her shoulders, the sleeve torn at the seam, ragged like it had been clawed at. Her eyes were glassy, darting past me to the floor. "You okay?" I asked, my voice low, tighter than I meant it to be. She nodded, too quick, too jerky. "Just exhausted. Can we talk in the morning?" Her words slurred, thick with whatever she'd been drinking. I wanted to grab her shoulders, demand to know where she'd been, why she looked Arctic-like state she was in, but I bit it back. Instead, I steadied her as she leaned into me, guiding her up the stairs. Her weight sagged against me, and as I peeled off her soaked jacket, a sharp scent hit me. Woody, musky, expensive. Not my Collion. Not anything I owned. Something splintered inside me. A quiet break I couldn't name yet. I got her into bed, movements mechanical, silent. As I pulled the blanket over her, she mumbled something barely audible, her voice a drunken slur. It wasn't supposed to happen. I froze, my hand hovering over her. "What?" I said, sharper than I intended, but she was already gone, breaths deep and uneven. I stood there, staring at her in the dim light, her face slack against the pillow. The woman I'd married 3 years ago, the one I'd built a life with, felt like a stranger sprawling across our bed. I didn't sleep that night. I ended up downstairs, a mug of tea cooling untouched on the counter, her words looping in my head. It wasn't supposed to happen. What hadn't? My mind spun, chasing shadows, piecing together fragments that didn't fit. By 7:45 a.m., she shuffled into the kitchen, wincing against the gray light seeping through the blinds. Her eyes were bloodshot, her face puffy from the hangover clawing at her. She looked at me like she wasn't sure what she'd find. Anger, silence, or something worse. "Morning," she said, her voice small, testing the air. I didn't reply, just nodded toward the counter. Her boots sat there, crusted with dried mud, one heel scraped raw. Next to them, the silver bracelet she'd worn last night, bent, a tiny star charm missing. I'd found it in her jacket pocket, snapped like it had been yanked or crushed. Her gaze followed mine, and I saw it. Her skin went pale, then flushed red. "Jake, I know this looks bad," she started, her voice trembling. "Do you even remember what you said last night?" I cut in calm but cold, a storm brewing beneath my ribs. She blinked, grasping at the haze of the night. Then she sank into a chair, cradling her head in her hands. "We went to this spot in Old Town. Me, Kelly, the girls. I drank too much. Way too much. I don't even know how I got home. Kelly said I tripped getting out of the lift, spilled my stuff everywhere. That's probably when the bracelet broke. Her words spilled out fast, like she could stitch the story together if she hurried. I studied her, silent. And the jacket. I pressed. That's here. Looks like someone tried to rip it off you. She flinched, hesitating. I don't know. Maybe when I fell. Or at the bar. It was packed. People were sloppy. You know how it gets. She was talking too quickly now, filling the gaps, her fingers tapping nervously on the table. I held her gaze, searching for the truth in her darting eyes, her unsteady hands. She was spinning a story, but it felt flimsy, full of holes I couldn't ignore. I didn't push her then. Part of me still wanted to believe her, to chalk it up to a messy night, to my own overactive imagination. I wanted to trust that she hadn't crossed a line I couldn't unsee. But that scent, the tear, her muttered words, they gnawed at me. The next few days, Sarah acted like nothing had happened. She made coffee in the morning, chatted about her coworker's latest drama, laughed at some dumb sitcom we watched. I played along, nodding, smiling, but her story sat heavy in my chest. I kept quiet, watching her every move, waiting for the next thread to unravel. The days after Sarah's late night return blurred into a tense routine. She moved through the house like everything was fine, humming over her coffee, asking about my day at the warehouse like we were still the couple we'd been a year ago. I nodded along, kept my tone even, but every smile I gave her was a mask. That torn jacket hung in the closet, the muddy boots sat by the door, and her broken bracelet rattled in my mind like a loose screw. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was hiding something big, but I didn't confront her. Not yet. I needed more than a gut hunch and a whiff of strange cologne. A week later, on a Wednesday, I got my chance. Work let out early, some issue with the loading dock shutting down half the shift. I texted Sarah, figuring she'd be out running errands like she'd said that morning. Home early. Want to grab lunch? No reply. I didn't think much of it. She was probably busy, but when I pulled into our driveway in Northeast Portland, her blue hatchback was already there, parked crooked like she'd rushed in. The rain had stopped, leaving the air thick and damp, and the house sat quiet under a heavy gray sky. I let myself in, the door creaking faintly. Silence greeted me, but then a muffled thump from upstairs, followed by her voice. Light, laughing, the kind of sound she hadn't made around me in months. My stomach tightened. I slipped off my shoes, moving slow, each step deliberate as I climbed the stairs. The sound grew clearer, her words drifting through the half-open bedroom door. I stopped just shy of a landing, hidden in the shadow of the banister. God, Mia, it was unreal, Sarah said, her tone bright, unguarded. She was on the phone, pacing, oblivious. I didn't even mean for her to go that far, but after a couple drinks, it just happened. A pause, then a laugh, low, conspiratorial. I didn't expect him to be that good. The guy's a damn force. I don't know if it was the way he took charge or just how sure of himself he was, but holy hell, he knew what he was doing. My jaw clenched so hard I felt a pop. She kept going, her voice dipping softer, dangerous. It was supposed to be a one-time thing, you know? Just a fling. But honestly, I needed it. Jake's great. He is. But he doesn't see me anymore. Not like Ryan does. Ryan. A name. It landed like a brick in my gut. She sighed, almost giddy. I told him I'd meet him tomorrow night. He got the same room, same spot. No way I'm bailing this time. No guilt. No hesitation. Just excitement. Raw and unfiltered. I gripped the railing, knuckles white, my pulse hammering in my ears. Every word was a blade, slicing through the life I thought we had. She wasn't just confessing. She was planning. This wasn't a mistake she regretted. It was a choice she savored. I could have stormed in, kicked the door wide, made her face me. I pictured it. Her shock, her stammering, the phone clattering to the floor. But I didn't. Rage burned hot, but something colder took over control. I needed more than her words to Mia. I needed proof, something solid to hold up when the time came. So I backed away, step by careful step, until I was downstairs again. My hands shook as I grabbed a glass of water, gulping it down to steady myself. She didn't hear me leave. She didn't know I'd heard. That night, Sarah came down for dinner like nothing was wrong, all smiles and small talk. How was work? she asked, stirring a pot of pasta on the stove. I shrugged, forcing a casual tone. Fine. Slow day. She nodded, oblivious, and I watched her, really watched her. The way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the way her lips curved when she thought I wasn't looking. She was lighter, freer, like a weight had lifted. And I knew why. Ryan. The name echoed in my skull, a drumbeat I couldn't silence. After she went to bed, I did something I never imagined doing. I waited until her breathing leveled out, then slipped her phone from the nightstand. The passcode was still the same, our anniversary. She hadn't thought I'd look. I opened her messages, scrolling until I found it. Our Ryan. My thumb hovered, then tapped. The thread unfolded, a dozen messages back and forth. Nothing explicit. She was too careful for that, but the intent was clear. You were stunning last week. Can't stop thinking about it, he'd written 2 days ago. Tomorrow's all I've been waiting for, she'd replied that morning. Counting the minutes. My chest hollowed out, a slow collapse. I sat back on the couch, the screen glowing in the dark, my mind racing. Who was this guy? I dug deeper. His full name was in her contacts, Ryan Kessler. A quick search online pulled him up, mid-30s, married, a sales rep with a slick LinkedIn profile. His Instagram was public, plastered with photos of his wife, Lauren, and their daughter, a gap-toothed kid with pigtails. Vacations in Bend, a 4th of July barbecue, a happy anniversary post from 6 months back. He had a life, a family, and he was throwing it away for this. Just like Sarah. I set the phone down, my hands cold. Tomorrow night, she'd said. Same room, same spot. She was going back to him. The betrayal wasn't a one-off. It was a pattern, a plan. I could feel the ground shifting under me, the life we'd built crumbling. But I didn't wake her. I didn't yell. Instead, I leaned back, staring at the ceiling, and made a decision. I wasn't going to beg her to stay or plead for the truth. I was going to let her dig her own grave, and I'd be there to watch it happen. The next morning, I woke up with a plan. Sarah's words from that phone call, same room, same spot, looped in my head, a taunt I couldn't shake. She'd slept soundly beside me, oblivious to the storm she'd unleashed, while I'd lain awake, piecing together what came next. I wasn't going to let her slip away with a smile and a lie. If she was choosing Ryan Kessler, I'd make damn sure I had everything I needed to bury her with it. Not out of spite, not yet, but because knowing the truth cold and hard was the only way I'd keep my footing. Sarah moved through breakfast like it was any other Friday. She sipped her coffee, scrolled her phone, tossed out a casual, I might be out late tonight. Kelly's dragging us to some birthday thing. Her voice was smooth, practiced, and I nodded, playing along. Sounds fun, I said, my tone flat but steady. Tell her happy birthday for me. She flashed a quick smile, phony, polished, and I let it hang there, silent dare. She didn't catch the edge in my eyes. She was too busy planning her escape. All day at the warehouse, I was a ghost, stacking boxes, checking manifests, my hands moving while my mind churned. Ryan Kessler's face floated behind every task, his smug grin from those family photos mocking me. I clocked out at 5, drove home, and waited. Sarah was already getting ready when I walked in. She stood by the hall mirror, smoothing her hair, a deep green dress hugging her frame. Tight, low-cut, the kind she hadn't worn for me in years. Her heels clicked against the hardwood as she grabbed her purse. Heading out, she said, barely glancing my way. Don't wait up. Out where? I asked, keeping my voice even, testing her. Kelly's thing, she replied, quick and clipped. Some bar downtown. I nodded slow, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make her shift her weight. Have a good time, I said finally. She smiled again, tight, rehearsed, and slipped out the door. I counted to 10, grabbed my keys, and followed. Her taillights wove through Portland's evening traffic, the city lights smearing against the damp windshield. I kept my distance, headlights off her bumper, shadowing her like a hunter. She didn't head to Old Town, where Kelly liked to drink. Instead, she turned toward the river, pulling into a gravel lot behind a nondescript motel, the kind with flickering neon and curtains drawn tight. Low-key, out of sight. My pulse thudded as I parked across the street, engine off, lights dimmed. 10 minutes later, A sleek black sedan rolled in. Ryan Kessler stepped out, all tailored jacket and polished shoes, his hair perfect even in the drizzle. He leaned against his car, checking his phone with that same cocky ease I'd seen online. Then Sarah appeared, rounding the corner from the motel side entrance. No hesitation, she walked straight to him, and they kissed right there in the open. Her arms looped around his neck, his hands slid to her waist, and she laughed, a sound that cut through the night. He murmured something in her ear. She tilted her head back, grinning like a kid sneaking out past curfew. I lifted my phone, hand steady despite the fire in my chest. Snap. One of the kiss, her fingers tangled in his hair. Snap. One of them pressed close, his hand low on her back. Snap. One of her gazing up at him, eyes bright, alive in a way I hadn't seen in months. My stomach turned to stone, but I kept shooting, each click locking the truth in place. They lingered a moment longer, shoulder to shoulder, then disappeared inside, their rhythm practiced familiar. This wasn't their first time. It was a routine. I sat there, gripping the wheel, my jaw locked, so tight my teeth ached. Part of me wanted to charge in, drag him out by his collar, make her explain to his face what the hell she was doing. But that was chaos, desperation, and I wasn't desperate. Not yet. I had what I needed. Pictures, proof, a timestamp betrayal. I drove home slow, the city blurring past, my mind settling into something sharp and cold. She thought she could play me, but I was done being the fool. When I got back, I called a locksmith. He showed up at 9:30 p.m., a grizzled guy with a toolbox and no questions. New locks front and back, I told him. He nodded, got to work, the clank of metal filling the quiet. By 10 p.m., it was done. New keys in my hand, hers useless. I sat on the couch, waiting, the house dark except for a single lamp. At 11:57 p.m., I heard it, the soft jiggle of the doorknob, then a harder twist. A knock, tentative, then sharp. My phone buzzed. Sarah, lighting up the silence. I let it ring, watching the screen fade. Another knock, louder now, then pounding. Jake. Her voice cut through the wood, edged with panic. What the hell? Open the door. I waited, counting the beats, letting her stew in it. Then I stood, crossed the room, and swung the door wide. She looked like a wreck, hair windblown, mascara smudged, one heel clutched in her hand, the other lost somewhere in her night. Her eyes snapped from confusion to fury. What is this? She snapped, stepping forward. Why won't my key work? Change the locks, I said, voice flat. Figured if you're gonna lie to my face, you don't need a way in. She froze, mouth parting. Jake. I cut her off, holding up my phone, flipping through the photos. Her and Ryan, kissing, laughing, tangled up like lovers. Her face drained of color, eyes wide as the images sank in. Where do you want me to start? I asked, low and steady. The lies? The cheating? Or how you looked me in the eye and said it was Kelly's birthday? She didn't speak, just stared at the screen, her breath shallow. You're done here, I said. Tomorrow, I'm calling a lawyer. Your stuff's going to your mom's. Her lips trembled. Jake, wait, please, it's not. I shook my head. You made it exactly what it is. Now, get out. She stood there a beat longer, wiping her face, then turned and stumbled back to her car. The engine sputtered to life, and she was gone. I shut the door, the new lock clicking into place, and felt the weight of silence settle in, heavy but mine. The house was too quiet after Sarah left. The hum of her absence filled every corner, a hollow sound I wasn't used to. I stood by the door for a long minute, the new key cold in my hand, her taillights long gone into the Portland night. My chest felt raw, like someone had scraped it clean, but there was no regret. She'd made her choice. Ryan Kessler, that motel, those lies, and I'd made mine. I wasn't going to shout or chase her down. I'd build something stronger from the wreckage. The truth, laid bare, and a life without her shadow. The next morning, I was up before dawn. Coffee in hand, I sat at the kitchen table and dialed a lawyer, a guy my coworker recommended, no nonsense and sharp. Divorce, I said when he picked up. I've got photos, dates, proof of infidelity. I want it clean and fast. He asked a few questions. How long we've been married, any assets, kids. 3 years, a house, No kids? I told him. Good, he said. No kids makes it smoother. Bring the evidence Monday. I hung up, the wheels turning, and felt a strange calm settle in. This wasn't about revenge. It was about cutting the rot out. By noon, I packed her things, clothes, books, that damn green dress, into boxes and hauled them to the porch. Her mom lived an hour out in Salem. I texted her the address and a curt, "Pick this up by tomorrow, or it's gone." No reply, but I didn't care. Then I sat down with my phone, the photos of Sarah and Ryan glowing on the screen. I scrolled through Ryan's Instagram again. Lauren, his wife, smiling in every frame, oblivious to the snake she'd married. My jaw tightened. She deserved to know. I found her email on a community page she ran, something about a book club, and sent the pictures. No long explanation, just thought you should see this. From Jake, Sarah's husband. I hit send and leaned back, the weight of it lifting slightly. An hour later, my inbox pinged. Thank you for telling me. I'm so sorry. Short, raw, no questions. I didn't reply. Lauren's fight wasn't mine, but I'd given her the ammo. What she did with it was up to her. Sarah tried reaching out that afternoon. 3 calls, a string of texts. Jake, please, let's talk. I messed up, I know, but it's not what you think. Then longer ones, excuses piling up. I was lost, stressed. It didn't mean anything. I read them once, deleted them, and blocked her number. Her words were noise, empty, too late. She'd had months to come clean, years to see me. And instead, she'd picked a stranger in a motel room. I wasn't her fallback plan. By Monday, the divorce was in motion. The lawyer laid it out. Oregon's no-fault state meant her cheating wouldn't change much, but the photos kept her from spinning some sob story. She'll get half the house equity unless you fight it, he said. I don't care, I told him. Just get me out. He nodded, filed the papers, and that was that. No kids, no messy custody, just a clean break, pinning the judge's stamp. It'd be over in 6 months, maybe less. Word trickled back through mutual friends over the next few days. Sarah had crashed at her mom's, then moved in with Kelly for a bit. She tried calling Ryan, they said, but he ghosted her, radio silence. I wasn't surprised. Guys like him don't stick around when the game's up. Then came the kicker. Lauren had kicked him out, filed for divorce 2 days after my email, took the kid and half his bank account. His perfect little Instagram life was ash, and I didn't feel a shred of pity. He'd torched it himself. The house stayed quiet, but I didn't mind it as much. I started filling the space, small things at first. Got back to the gym, lifting weights until my arms burned, the ache drowning out the noise in my head. Took a weekend trip to the coast, just me and the ocean, the salt air scrubbing away her memory. Friends I'd let drift, Matt Carlos, came by with beers and bad jokes, and I laughed, real laughs, for the first time in months. Sleep came easier too, no more staring at the ceiling, waiting for her key in the lock. Sarah faded into rumors. Someone said she'd moved back to Salem permanently, working some retail job, living with her sister now. Kelly stopped talking to her. Guess even she had limits. I didn't ask for updates, didn't care to. She'd lost more than I had. A husband who'd have fought for her, a life she could have kept if she'd just looked at me instead of chasing a thrill. Me? I lost a lie, a woman I never really knew. And in the trade, I found something better, myself. It wasn't perfect. Some nights, the silence still stung, the empty side of the bed a reminder of what broke. But it wasn't lonely anymore, it was mine. I'd cook dinner, play music she hated, leave the dishes in the sink just because I could. I wasn't rebuilding for someone else. I was rebuilding for me. And that felt like enough, like freedom, hard-won and sharp-edged, but real. The divorce finalized on a crisp October morning, 6 months after I'd locked Sarah out. The lawyer called me at work, his voice clipped and businesslike. Papers are signed. Judge stamped it. You're free. I thanked him, hung up, and stood there in the warehouse break room, the hum of forklifts fading into white noise. Free. The word felt heavy, not triumphant, more like a door closing than one swinging wide. I didn't celebrate, didn't crack a beer or call anyone. I just drove home, the Portland skyline smudged with fog, and let the quiet sink in. The house was mine now. Sarah hadn't fought for it. Half the equity went her way, but I refinanced, kept the keys. Her boxes were long gone, picked up by her mom that weekend after the lockout. The place still echoed with her sometimes, a dent in the couch, a coffee mug she'd liked, but I was stripping it back, layer by layer. I painted the bedroom a deep blue she'd have hated, swapped the curtains for blinds, hauled in a new chair that didn't carry her shape. It wasn't erasing her. It was reclaiming what was left. Life settled into a rhythm I hadn't known I needed. Mornings were mine, coffee on the porch, the air sharp with fall, no one to rush for. I hit the gym 5 days a week, the clank of weights and burn in my shoulders a kind of therapy. My hands got calloused again, my frame filled out, and the mirror stopped showing a guy who'd let himself fade. Friends noticed. Matt dragged me to a Trail Blazers game. Carlos cooked some god-awful chili and laughed when I choked it down. They didn't ask about Sarah much, just filled the space with noise and stories, and I let them. It was enough. I took a trip in November, solo, to the Oregon coast. Cannon Beach stretched out gray and wild, waves crashing against haystack rock like they could wash the past away. I walked the shore for hours, the wind biting my face, sand crunching under my boots. No phone, no plan, just me and the roar of the ocean. I thought about her once, standing there, the memory of her laugh flickering like a bad signal. It didn't hurt anymore, just felt distant, like a song I used to know. I drove back that night, windows down, the cold keeping me sharp, and slept deeper than I had in years. Word about Sarah filtered through now and then, unasked for updates from the grapevine. She'd stayed in Salem, shacked up with her sister in a cramped apartment above a deli. Got a job at some boutique, folding sweaters or something, her grad school degree gathering dust. Kelly cut her off, apparently caught her texting Ryan again, begging for a reply he never sent. Ryan's own collapse was messier. Lauren took the house, the kid, most of his savings. Last anyone heard, he was crashing on a buddy's couch, dodging child support and whatever pride he had left. They'd burned each other out, two sparks that flared and fizzled, leaving nothing but ash. I didn't gloat, didn't need to. Their wreckage wasn't my victory, it was just consequence, predictable as the tide. Sarah tried reaching me once more, a letter that showed up in December, her handwriting shaky on the envelope. Jake, I'm sorry. I was lost, stupid, and I threw us away. I miss you. Pages of it. Excuses and tears smudging the ink. I read it, felt a flicker of something, pity, maybe, then tossed in the trash. Missing me didn't change what she'd done. It didn't rebuild trust from a motel room and a stranger's cologne. I didn't know her reply. Winter rolled in, and I leaned into it. Cooked meals I'd never bothered with before. Steaks, pasta from scratch, blasting music she'd have turned off, dishes piling up without guilt. I started a project in the garage, sanding down an old table I'd found curbside, the rhythm of it steadying my hands. Nights got easier, the silence less a void and more space I owned. I wasn't looking for someone new, didn't want to. This wasn't about replacing her. It was about finding what I'd lost under her weight. By spring, the shift was real. I'd laugh without forcing it, sleep without ghosts, wake up without checking the other side of the bed. Friends dragged me to a bar one night, some dive downtown with sticky floors and loud guitars. A woman smiled at me across the room, dark eyes, easy grin, and I smiled back, but that was it. No rush, no need. I bought her a drink, we talked about nothing, and I left alone, the night air cool against my skin. It wasn't about her or anyone, it was about me being okay walking away. Sarah lost a man who'd have moved mountains for her, a life she could have held if she'd just stayed. I lost a mirage, a version of her I'd built in my head, and it stung to see it dissolve. But in the rubble, I found something solid, myself unbent, unapologetic. The house stopped feeling empty. It felt full, not of her, but of me. My choices, my mess, my peace. And that, in the end, was more than I'd dared hope for. The unraveling had broken me open, but what came after stitched me back stronger, scarred sure but whole.